It's time, Cougar Nation. Cougar Tracks. The best season analysis with BYU insider Mitch Harper on KSL NewsRadio and on video every day on the YouTube page for KSL Sports.
Welcome into Cougar Tracks here on the KSL Sports YouTube page and KSL NewsRadio, your legacy home of the Cougars. It's Tuesday, January 20th, and I am your BYU insider, Mitch Harper. Hope everyone had a fantastic holiday weekend that was capped off by the college football season coming to a close, and that's where we start things off in our top story of the day.
The top story of the day. The biggest story in the world of BYU sports right here on Cougar Tracks.
The Indiana Hoosiers are the national champions in college football. The Hoosiers took down Miami 27-21 in Miami in a game where Indiana had more fans than the hometown team inside Hard Rock Stadium. What a moment for the Indiana football program to become national champions. Second losingest program in college football history. Now they are atop the mountain of college football. If Indiana can win a national title, anyone can do it. And look, Indiana had a lot of things going their way. Really good coach, a great coach in Curt Cignetti, identified perfect fits, brought over a lot of the key guys from James Madison over to Indiana, retained a lot of key players from last year's playoff run. Indiana, though, is atop the college football world and proving that this is a new era of college football where anyone can go win the thing. Indiana's got a little bit more of a margin for error than a team like BYU because Indiana's in the Big Ten. The Big Ten has now 3 consecutive national champions. The SEC still hasn't been to a national championship game since the Big 12 did as well. That was back in the 2022 season when Georgia crushed TCU in the national title. That's the last time the SEC was represented in this national title game. The SEC prides itself on being the best league in college football, but the talent is distributing like never before in this sport. And programs like BYU now have the chance to become and realistically believe they can go win the thing. And when you see Indiana do it, I think it gives that belief that BYU can go do it again. The Cougars, of course, did it in 1984, and now they're on the path to trying to make it happen next season or in the years to come. But last year, BYU, 2025, they go 12-2, and it was a spectacular season for BYU, and it sets up the groundwork, you would think, for a potential run to the college football playoff next season. And what's crazy about next year, I was looking at it, the college football playoff national championship, it ends on January 25th, which is crazy to me. Even though the calendar is a hot topic among college football media types, it's insane that that's how late the season will go. But what's noteworthy is that the national championship game will be played in Las Vegas. And look, it might be crazy to say BYU chasing the national championship. Got to go get to the playoff first. But if Indiana can go reach the national championship, why not BYU? And in Vegas, can you imagine if the stars aligned and BYU actually made a run to Las Vegas? That would be all blue. That would be a sea of royal blue in those stands at Allegiant Stadium, host of the college football playoff national championship in 2027. So that's got to be the goal for BYU. When you see programs like Indiana do it, why not BYU? And even Travis Hansen, he pointed that out on X. And Travis Hansen, former BYU basketball great, he's heavily involved with NIL and the athletic department right now. He even went to X and shared a message as well, basically saying what I'm saying, why not BYU? Why can't they go do it again as they did in 1984? BYU football finished ranked in the final AP Top 25 poll for the 2025 season. The day after the season ends, the AP starts to roll out its final poll of a given season. Back-to-back years where they've waited until the next day to release the final poll. It used to be just a few hours after the final horn sounded on the national championship, they would push out the national rankings for the final poll of the season. BYU in 2025 finishes at number 11 in the rankings. I'm not shocked, but I'm also, again, disappointed by these pollsters. BYU at 12-2 finishes at number 11 in the rankings. They moved up from number 12 to number 11 where they were at entering the bowl season. But it's the teams in front of BYU that prevented BYU from getting its first top 10 finish since 1996. So here's the poll. Number 1, Indiana, of course, the national champs, 16-0. First 16-0 team since Yale in 1894. How crazy is that? Number 2, Miami. Number 3, Ole Miss. Number 4, Oregon. Okay, fine. Number 5, Ohio State. Seems a little bit high for a team that pretty got soundly beat in the quarterfinals, but okay. Ohio State at 5. Georgia at 6. Texas Tech, who got hammered by Oregon, blanked on New Year's Day. They're at 7. Texas A&M at 8, who lost on their home field in the first round of the playoff. Didn't win a conference title. Didn't play for an SEC title and had, quite frankly, a very weak SEC schedule. They're at 8, so I got a problem with that one. Number 9, Alabama, did win a playoff game, but got hammered against Indiana and lost 4 games this season. They stay at 9, or they go move up to 9 from number 11. And then number 10, Notre Dame, 10-2, picked up their ball and went home and decided not to play in the bowl season. They're at 10. And then number 11 is BYU, who opted to play in the bowl season, beat a nationally ranked team in the Pop-Tarts Bowl. So another top 25 win. They only moved up 1 spot and were left outside the top 10. Number 12 is Texas, 13 Oklahoma, 14 Utah, who moved up from 15, and then Vanderbilt at 15. Some other notables in the rankings. Houston from the Big 12 checks in at 22. And then number 25, TCU. They took down USC in the Alamo Bowl, so TCU slides into the back half of the rankings. 5 Big 12 teams finish ranked in the 2025 season for the Big 12. But BYU deserved to be in the top 10. I think for Notre Dame, like, I get it, the whole thought of we're not in the playoff, we're going home. But you know what? That should punish you in the polls. So if BYU had just sat, they could have maybe been in the top 10. They beat a top 25 team. Again, we've hammered the pollsters this entire football season. If anything, this is the perfect poll where you can really size up the body of work. I get it from a week-to-week basis where that can get a little bit tricky, especially when you're in a press box and things like that. But the last poll before today was released on December 7th. And you had all the chance to watch the bowl season, watch these resumes form and really get crystallized and final for the season. And you take a step back and look at what BYU accomplished. You look at what Notre Dame was, a really good team. But again, you're going based on opinion. And they decided to not play in the bowl season. If they were truly the 10th best team, we'll go play in the Pop-Tarts Bowl and go hammer BYU. Instead, they opt to stay home. That should penalize them and fall outside the top 10. Go put a team in the top 10 that actually went and beat a top 25 team and had a really good resume, and their only 2 losses were to the number 7 teams in the country. I think BYU deserved to be in the top 10. I got an argument with Texas A&M, though. Alabama as well. Those teams, I think BYU should have been around 9 in the final AP top 25. It's the tied for the highest ranking in the Kalani Sitake era, tying 2020. So under Kalani, BYU has finished ranked 4 times. 2020, they were number 11. 2021, they were number 19. 2024, number 13. That was last season. And then this year, 2025, they go up 2 more spots at number 11. So 40% of Kalani Sitake's seasons have finished in the final AP Top 25 rankings. That's not bad. And the common thread in all of those seasons, no preseason ranking in any of them. Next year, that changes. And we'll get to that around the corner as some way too early polls are coming out for BYU football in 2026. And the Cougars are ranked pretty high, projected to be high next season. It's Cougar Tracks, and it's powered by KSL Sports. Welcome back into Cougar Tracks here on the KSL Sports YouTube page. Every day we're talking BYU sports, and throughout the offseason, you'll get your BYU football fix here on Cougar Tracks. Rest assured of that. We're talking BYU football all throughout the year here on Cougar Tracks on the legacy home of the Cougars, KSL News Radio, and the KSL Sports YouTube page. Be so kind enough, subscribe to the YouTube page for KSL Sports, like this video, and also subscribe to the audio form of this podcast wherever you get your podcast. Leave a 5-star rating and a review. It helps out the show a ton. So tomorrow, this was kind of flew under the radar a little bit. If you go to the Watch ESPN page, Watch ESPN shows a video scheduled for 9 a.m. on Wednesday on ESPNU, the Big 12 football schedule release for the 2026 season. How about that? We're going to get the schedule. We knew we'd be kind of in that earshot range of the schedule being released. It's been around January 30th to around February 5th for the most part, the past couple years since BYU joined the league. But we're expected to get that schedule tomorrow, 9 a.m. on ESPNU. No official announcement from the Big 12 Conference, but it's on the Watch ESPN page. Regardless, the schedule is going to be released here very soon. And the non-conference schedule, of course, for BYU is Utah Tech on September 5th, at Colorado State September 19th, and then Notre Dame, which has been reported to be a expected October date for BYU and Notre Dame in Provo, which is a huge game. That's going to be a massive clash between two teams that should be really good in 2026. But some questions that I have about the schedule that I want to see answered in this schedule release with the Big 12 Conference announcing the schedule. So here's the 9 games that BYU has in Big 12 play. It's an even year for BYU, so 5 home, 4 away. That's always big. And one of those away is at Utah. So it's only 3 games outside the state does BYU have to travel to inside Big 12 play. But here are the games. Arizona, Arizona State, Baylor, Iowa State, Cincinnati, they all come to Provo. And then away games at Kansas, at TCU, at UCF, at Utah. Not bad. And then again, like I said, Utah Tech, Colorado State, and Notre Dame. So here's the questions that I have that I want answered for the schedule. Which Big 12 opponent does BYU potentially get in week 2? If the Notre Dame game lands in October, which game in week 2 for the Big 12? To me, what would make a lot of sense is Arizona in week 2 because Arizona has an opening and Arizona is popping up on some way too early top 25 polls. I could totally see that as a network TV, Fox Friday night clash in Provo. Put that thing on a weeknight and showcase that game to the masses in college football. That would make a lot of sense to me. Week 2 with Arizona. Where does the bye land this season? There's only one bye this year as the season starts in September. When the season kicks off in August, that creates a situation when there's 2 byes in a given season. We've experienced that the past 2 years. This year, only one bye. And where the bye lands is very important in all of this. I laid out what would be my proposed schedule for the Big 12 and for BYU to really maximize BYU's playoff potential because That's what's at stake here with BYU. Look, I understand you're not trying to cater to any team. You're trying to be equal to all 16 teams in the league. But Texas Tech and BYU are going to be viewed as the sizable favorites in the Big 12 going into next season. What can you do to enhance the storylines, to enhance the platform for BYU week after week to where they're climbing the polls and they don't hit a plateau? So the spot where the bye lands is critical for a team like BYU, where they're going to be probably a preseason top 15 team next year, which puts them right into the conversation of the playoff before toe meets leather next year. So where that bye lands is critical. I look at it and say, put it after the UCF game, because the UCF game is a 2-time zone game. That's always nice to then have a little bit of breathing space after a long travel game. Slide that bye week right after UCF. And that's another question I have, is where does UCF land? I propose the idea of putting it on General Conference weekend. Put that as a Friday night game. BYU goes on the road at UCF. Typically, the General Conference weekend has been a home game. But I think if you want to make this work, when you factor in potentially an October date with Notre Dame, put BYU UCF on a weeknight, early October. You go through about 4 or 5 games in the season, and then a bye, and then you get ready potentially for a team like Notre Dame, if that's where it ends up being for the Cougars. But that UCF game, where that lands because of 2-time zone travel, that's noteworthy to me. Which game is going to be the General Conference weekend game? Because that's typically, obviously, a weeknight game for BYU, or it could be the bye as well. That could be in the cards too. You go the first month of the season, have that be a bye, General Conference weekend, and then maybe get ready for whatever the next game is going to be on the schedule. But again, how to stack up the games to tell the story of BYU football as a college football playoff contender. I would look at this game or this schedule and look at it through that lens if you're the Big 12. And I think they do that with nearly any team. But I think with BYU and Texas Tech, you really have to get strategic with this, because what we've learned is that if it's a 12-team playoff format, it's most likely going to be only a one-bid league. That's what it's going to be. How can you get creative and figure out a way to make this a 2-bid conference? Now, you need some of these teams that are going to be expected to be really good to live up to it. But I think if you put BYU and Utah, the rivalry game, which has been 2 years ago, November 9th, this past season, October 18th, if you put that one at the final game of the season, that makes all the sense in the world. Because if BYU is a top 10 team, top 7, whatever they may be, that game paired up with the fact that it's a rivalry game, massive stakes, huge eyeballs, huge interest. That's a year where it makes sense. Hey, throw that into rivalry weekend, because BYU chasing the playoff, if that's what it ends up being, that's going to get a huge television audience, because the October 18th spot delivered no television audience compared to really what it should have been, considering all the buildup with the big noon kickoff pregame show. There was only 2 million viewers that watched that game. And when you say, oh, it was tough competition, well, there's tough competition every week in college football with these supersized Big Ten and SEC schedules. You're always going to have tough competition to go up against. So at this point, just slide it in at rivalry weekend, because I think BYU is going to be really good. I think Utah is going to be solid. I don't know if they're a way too early top 15 team as they finished this past year, but I think that Morgan Scalley, you know what the identity is going to be of his program. And you saw a little bit of that in the Las Vegas Bowl, and they return Devin Dampier, Wayshawn Parker. So Utah's got a nice core to work with, even though it feels like a year one for Morgan Scalley rather than inheriting the program that Whittingham built. It's truly now Scalley's program with all the coaching staff changes that he's had to hire for in replace of the departure of Whittingham to Michigan. Still, I think at this point, go BYU and Utah at the end of the season on rivalry weekend. I'm okay with that. Honestly, I'm okay with any spot where that game lands. But again, you're trying to get strategic with how to put BYU in the best position to enhance their at-large resume, because what we've learned too is where you lose sometimes matters a lot as well. And that's the argument to maybe keeping Utah as an earlier game, because where you lose sometimes matters more than losing it all, because BYU lost on November 7th, or what was it, November 8th at Texas Tech, and they could never climb back in. They never could recuperate because we get those weekly polls, and they never could climb back into the thing. They were boxed out. A week later, they beat TCU by 31, boxed out. Didn't matter. They were still outside the playoff, and none of that mattered. BYU was boxed out for the rest of the season. So that's the argument to maybe keeping Utah in October before the playoff rankings come out. So then you got a little bit of room to recuperate. But I still think with the games that you have, with like an Arizona State that's going to be a big one, I think Arizona State's going to be really good. I know they lose a lot of personnel, but I think ASU they've replenished that roster really well. I mean, heck, Kenny Dillingham was winning games with Jeff Sims. He's going to win with whoever he's got on his roster. I think he's got a pretty good roster that's built up through the portal and their recruiting class coming in as well. Cincinnati could be an intriguing game. At TCU could be a really good game. TCU's got a new offensive coordinator coming in from UConn, a little bit more of a physical style offense. At Kansas, that's a thorn in the side of BYU. So just, again, being strategic with what can elevate the storylines, where can BYU, find spots that really kind of put them on a platform to where they're in a position to, if they do lose, get back into the playoff conversation, because they're going to start the season high in the rankings. So that's important with constructing this schedule for BYU and really any team in the Big 12, but especially the ones that have some preseason buzz going in, because as we've seen, the preseason hype for teams tends to carry over into playoff rankings. And, Indiana's maybe a little bit of an exception because they're in the Big 10. So you just naturally, you get a couple wins in the Big 10, instantly fly up the rankings. Whereas the Big 12, the ACC, you got to be more strategic, because you don't get the benefit of the doubt by being in these leagues, which is insane to say. But it seems like that's how this sport operates every single year. But football schedule is expected to be released 9 a.m. on Wednesday. That according to Watch ESPN. So we'll keep tabs of that going forward here. Let's take our final break. We'll get to some of the way too early projections for BYU football in 2026. It's Cougar Tracks, and it's powered by KSL Sports. Welcome back into Cougar Tracks here on KSL News Radio. I am your BYU insider, Mitch Harper. One of my favorite times of the year in the calendar for college football is right now, because the way too early polls, I love these things. I love them. They're one of my favorite things about college football. They become such a part of the fabric of the sport. National championship ends, onto the next season and the way too early polls. And I love it, because it's college football at its core. It's debate, it's conversation, it's rankings. I love everything about it. I click on all of them. I like reading them. I think they're fun. It's insightful, and most of them will be wildly inaccurate. But they're also pretty fun to see, and it just kind of gives you a temperature of where the view and the mindset and just kind of the national perception of a team and a program at this point in the offseason calendar. And many of the way too early polls, well, all of them have BYU ranked. Some not as high as others, but there's some that got BYU in the top 10 or knocking on the door of the top 10. The lowest that I saw from some of the major national publications, Yahoo has BYU at number 15, which I think that's too low. For a team like BYU that brings back a quarterback in Bear Bachmeier, the Big 12 Offensive Player of the Year in LJ Martin, he's coming back. And you also bring back Isaiah Glasgow. You bring back some star cornerbacks. You bring back pretty much the entire defensive line outside of a edge rusher or two that were upperclassmen. But there's a feeling that maybe the guys that are in the building returning are going to take it to greater heights. I understand there's a new defensive coordinator, and that makes you pause a little bit, but I think 15's too low for this BYU team with the way that they've constructed this roster. And then you add Cade Uluwave from Cal. It's a really good BYU football roster that's being assembled for 2026. But Yahoo's got him at 15. On3 and USA Today have BYU at 13, which fair. I think that's okay. I mean, I think that's the low end, personally, of where BYU should be in these way too early outlooks. CBS Sports has BYU at 12, and then the highest ranking from the national outlets that I gathered here, Fox has got, ESPN has BYU at number 11, and then Fox has BYU at number 10. So some good respect there given to BYU. I honestly think BYU should be somewhere in the 8 to 9 territory, that single-digit mark, with, again, the focus on retention. BYU's portal efforts have not been glamorous per se, but getting Cade Uluwave, getting Walker Lyons, getting Paki Finau, those are big-time additions. Those are guys that are going to step in and compete and play immediately for BYU and add to a team that pretty much brings back everyone. Yes, you lose Jack Kelly. Yes, you lose Chase Roberts. But there's a lot to like with what's returning, and then they just add pieces, and then you've got some heralded freshmen coming in from the high school ranks, like Bot Molitalo, some return missionaries. I think BYU's in a really good spot and should be a preseason top 10 team for the 2026 season. Some other odds and ends with way too early outlooks. Bear Bachmeier, he's popping up on way too early Heisman odds, 60-1 odds there. Here was something that was crazy. National Championship 2027 outlook. Utah has better odds than BYU. BYU at 70-1. Utah at 50-1. Look, and that's just one service. I think Utah is going to be a really good team. I don't know if you can confidently say they're better than BYU though right now. At least what's been built for 2026, because again, it feels like a completely new program already with Morgan Scalley. It wasn't just hand the keys off as expected with a coach in waiting deal. Whittingham took what he wanted. He took the coaches. He took some of the players that entered the portal with Smith Snowden, John Henry Daly, Celeste Moa. But Utah's got a lot of stability on the defensive side. I think Colton Swan will do a good job as the defensive coordinator. We'll see what Kevin McGivern does as OC. But I think BYU's in a great spot. And even if they are at number 15 next year in the AP Top 25, that's much better than starting the year unranked, because you go hammer some teams. Think about last year when you go crush Portland State 69-0. You do that as a ranked team, maybe you're moving up 2 spots instantly from that performance. Whereas when you're an unranked team, it almost just got ignored and everyone just chalked it up. Well, it's Portland State. Well, you got the visual of how dominant this team can be, even with a true freshman. And now all of that returns. So there's a lot to like with BYU football in 2026, but those way too early polls, like you can easily discredit them, and it's fine because it's tough to forecast anything in college football these days. No one had Indiana, Miami in the national title 11 months ago, but still it's a perception piece, and it's a barometer of how these programs are getting viewed year after year after year. I do have to laugh though when you do see some of these way too early polls. And after witnessing Indiana and Miami just play in the national title, you would think some of these national pollsters might have a little bit more of an open mind, a little bit more of a willingness to say, you know what, maybe Ohio State isn't just automatically guaranteed to be number 1. Maybe Texas is not guaranteed to be number 2. They can't help themselves. Because look, those teams on the surface, on the rosters, on the star ratings, it's glamorous. It's glitzy, but as we've seen in the portal era and with Indiana, and to a lesser extent Miami's a big player in building out rosters. They're a big brand, but they're viewed as lesser than because they're in the ACC compared to the SEC and Big Ten. Indiana showed that you got to have a great team. You got to have a great culture. You got to have a great locker room. Guys that want to play ball. They're all about ball. And that's what I like about BYU's makeup right now is they got guys that want to play at BYU. They're all about ball. They're all about proving themselves right, but then proving the outsiders wrong that they consistently prove wrong. And they got another chance next season to do that in maybe the biggest way possible because a BYU can live up to the hype because that's something that always worries Cougar fans. When the expectations are placed on BYU, can they live up to it? That's going to be the challenge in front of Kalani Sitake's program next year because whether it's 15 or 10 or a single-digit preseason ranking, expectations will be high for this group. And living up to it and exceeding those expectations historically has been a challenge for BYU. But I'd like to think with so much retention, the way that Kalani is cemented as the head coach after holding off Penn State, BYU retains Kalani. It just feels like the pieces are in place for a really big year again next season. But the countdown to 2026 begins now. As 2025 is over, 2026, the countdown begins. And we'll have you covered with everything BYU football throughout the offseason here on Cougar Tracks and on KSL News Radio and the KSL Sports YouTube page. Talk to you tomorrow here on Cougar Tracks. It's powered by KSL Sports.